Get the mask off.
How are you feeling, Shelley?
I'm fine. Yep, we're all fine at our household. How about yours?
Everybody's great. Yeah,
Good.
everybody's good.
Oh, that's good.
I'm worried now that I hear that if infants get COVID, they get the croup.
Yeah, I've heard that too, and which is I don't want to downplay croup, but at least it's
It's
doable. You do the hot shower thing, and
yeah.
but yeah, I know some friends that have an infant down by Durango, and they all have it right now. But he didn't get the croup, as far as I know. So that's good.
Good.
Yeah.
It's a good thing to keep you up at night, Ryan.
Oh, there's so much.
All right, we have quorum.
And you're not going to get, Carl is not attending.
Right.
So
Is Ingrid? Have we heard from Ingrid?
she hasn't told me that she's not.
Okay.
She'll be a little late because she, like me, doesn't know what a listening session on learning how to listen so we can listen is about, but I'm happy to watch. Morons.
All right, well, she'll probably join us. I'll text her.
She's on her way. Don't text her.
Oh,
Be here when she's here. You can start.
thank you, Tony.
You're welcome.
Ryan, take a roll.
All right, yes, sir. Mayor Godis,
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Willman,
Present.
Counselor Kell,
Here.
Counselor Stepp,
Yes, sir.
Counselor Hershey.
Present.
We have a quorum.
All right, I'll lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, item number 4, the only item on the agenda, really airport listening session formula.
I think Bree is going to take us through this, but if you could bring Michael Hughes over, that would be great.
He's promoted.
Thank you. And I think I can just kick off saying thank you guys for taking the time to do this tonight. I think we have a rough agenda that doesn't get everyone everything they want, but hopefully gets us enough of what everybody wants for this to be a success. And we just kind of want to see whether we hit the mark or not.
Thank you, Deborah, and thank you, Council, for joining us tonight. I'm hoping we, like Deborah said, captured what you guys are looking for and can just make sure that we are on the right page, because as you know, this is something that the airport, whenever we talk about it, is something that our community definitely cares passionately about, and so we want to make sure that we go into any conversations on it fully prepared and understanding what our objectives are and what you guys are hoping to get out of these meetings, because we know these are tough conversations to have with the community, but important. And so in that, just really quickly, as Deborah mentioned, when we went out for feedback from y'all of what you're hoping to get from these meetings, what you're hoping your objectives are, we got a little bit of different feedback from everybody. So what we've put together, we think is a good balance of sort of all the different things while still maintaining what we think will help facilitate a productive conversation and make sure that we're giving ample opportunities for our community members to be heard and fully understand and the new information that has come in with the Airspace Study, and with the upcoming decisions that you'll have to make on the various Southbridge funding items. And so big picture, the format that we're looking at for this event is similar to sort of an open house style with an emphasis on sort of listening. So we'll have an in-person meeting with 2 rooms. One room will be sort of preliminary information on a loop on a video, just so we can run through a lot of that technical information about the Airspace study and some of the other background information, and folks can come in and leave as they want, spend as much time as they'd like, but we've got that sort of running information going in one room. And then the second room would be in the style of open house boards. And we'll go through the exact boards here in a minute. But that's generally what we're looking at, is sort of an information space and boards walking around, talking about everything from really big picture visioning things to more specific questions. With that, a couple of things that we're hoping to do as we run through this is confirm that this meets what you guys are looking for outcomes, and a few other direction items. I'm going to really quickly share my screen here, just so I can have this pulled up as we are looking at it. Here is a draft meeting outline for us to look at, and want to just start off with our objectives. Why are we holding this meeting? What are we hoping to get out of this meeting? And with this, we have 3 objectives listed out. 1, to bring into the open community input, ideas, reactions, concerns, and hopes related to the airport operations and its future. 2, give the community critical information collected from the Airspace Study and Southbridge processes related to the airport's future. And 3, restore civility and respect to conversations about the airport and its future, using this listening session to ensure different views are heard and understood. So big picture, that's like generally the objectives we're hoping to get out of this meeting. Quickly, any red flags or like thumbs down on the objectives, or thumbs up?
It's hard for me to see with that. I just can't see everybody's face. You know what I'm saying, Brianna?
What was that, Jonathan?
I'm sorry, I can't see everybody if they have thumbs up or thumbs down when there's a presentation on the screen.
Oh, gotcha.
You probably can. So you can call on somebody if they have their hand up.
I got 1 thumbs up from Paula, unless I missed other folks. And if this generally looks good, I think that we can dive into the board suggestions. Got a thumbs up from Shelley.
Brianna, can I ask a question
Yeah. Go
on
ahead.
that number 2?
Mhm.
When the critical information, I assume that will be in the room with the presentation loop.
Yeah, so it'll actually be in both in different formats, because we want to give people an opportunity to react to that new information as well. So the video, the objective of that is to have a brief sort of like just a few minute video to go big picture through all the information. And then meanwhile in the room, that it will be sort of reiterated on boards as well with some strategic questions around it. So it'll appear in both spaces.
Well, so that will include, I would assume, like a cost information comparison of kind of the 2 options we're looking at, tunnel versus no tunnel.
Yeah,
I think
so
we should have costs for both, kind of at least rough costs. And then I'm just wondering if it will also include as well, because we had a technical presentation on that study, on the airspace study, but that didn't really give a very clear picture of what the impacts would be to the surrounding neighborhood. It just kind of had a bunch of dots on it was pretty technical information. So I guess I'm wondering if there will be the time taken to put that into an understandable layman's term for the community.
That would be the goal for both of those items. So for the cost, there are a couple areas there. So with the individual sort of options, in this case being the few options of the combinations between tunnel and where the runway is at. And I think the goal would be to include the cost there, maintenance costs or building costs, try and sort of put forward what those costs are there. And then with the technical information for the airspace study, you're absolutely right. That information is very technical and has some pretty profound impacts to what it looks like to fly in and out of our airport, as well as impacts to the neighborhood. So we would hope to capture that as well in a way that takes something that is very complicated, but hopefully putting it forward in a way that is very understandable for the community.
Thank you.
And then looks like Deborah has her hand raised.
Yeah, I would say, can we pull Terry over, because she is the one that has a much better understanding of how to translate the very technical into layman's terms.
Got it.
And Terry, I don't know if you heard that. I don't know what necessarily our ability is within, I'm assuming council wants to do this in February to, take all that highly technical information and make it easy to understand.
It's actually the report is, while the concepts behind it are technical, they really have broken it down into property by property, what obstructions are on individual properties, and exactly how much of that obstruction is above the airfield or the airspace. So I think, I think the starting point is that slide that you guys have seen with all of the red and orange dots indicating obstructions. But then I think, and I know Deborah didn't want to have staff at this meeting, so maybe this isn't a possibility, but if people had specific questions, for instance, about their property, we have pages, it is possible to look through this airspace study and find your property and figure out what trees need to be removed. It's very, very specific. And, the property owners' names are labeled there clearly. So I think it's the starting concepts are hard, but I think it's been translated well down to a property by property basis.
And I think I'm okay having staff if this is the format we pick, I'm okay with having staff there.
Yeah, I know. We expect this to be somewhat contentious, so.
I'm good with the objectives, though. If sorry, I didn't mean to jump ahead too much. But.
No, I think we can just go down and next item is meeting details. Does anybody have other questions about the objectives specifically? Sorry, Charlie, go ahead.
Thanks. A couple of things. First, when did this agenda packet get posted? I didn't realize there was an agenda for this meeting.
I don't know exactly when it was posted.
I think that's kind of a Ryan question. I mean,
and maybe I got an email on this. I just don't remember it. So I had to read through everything, and I was just curious. And again, not critical. I'm just trying to understand why I missed it.
I think we pushed this out on Friday, but I could be wrong, honestly.
It wasn't there as of the weekend. I know that, but I again, maybe I'm wrong too. So, all right. Anyway, the one comment I was going to make based on what we just talked about is we talk about staff being there or not. Deborah, I think ultimately that's your decision. But theoretically, if you were going to have staff there, people had questions. If we could have Bree or somebody with a computer where they could email staff and staff could respond to email questions, that might be another way of doing it, just to try to make sure that if we have questions we can't answer, that Bree or somebody could say, okay, well, Terry, this is the question came in, what's your answer? Not having people themselves send the questions, but have maybe Bree or somebody who is there facilitating this to send those. That's just an idea. So thanks.
Thanks, y'all. And then go ahead, Jonathan.
I was just going to say real quick, have we had to, I mentioned at the last meeting, is there a reason that, or is there a way that Jacobs can be there to answer some of these technical questions?
Hold on. Yeah, I think I'm still, yes, I think that if we set a meeting date, I can ask them to, for somebody to be there. And And I think that there are a lot of technical questions that the airport board probably could get into in terms of how the airfield works and that kind of thing. But I think that for the most part, I can probably explain like the basics in terms of the obstructions and the need for removals. And even, the changes that we could propose or would ask the council to make a decision about in terms of option 2 of shifting the runway to the north. But the quick answer to your question is yes, Jacobs could be there.
I think that'd be helpful. So seeing no other comments on the objectives, let's maybe get to the meeting time and date.
And actually, Jonathan, if it's okay, I'd actually like to go ahead and pop down to the boards, and then we can. I'm
Sure.
hoping that meeting details will go nice and quick. But really quickly, you bring up a good point of what does that look like when folks are sort of circulating around. The idea is that instead of sort of one person being like at the center of attention of everything, that folks would be able to go to sort of the areas that they're most interested in and sort of grab people. If it's not quite my area of expertise, I'd be like, oh, hey, let me go grab Terry or whoever the Jacobs representative is, to sort of have that more small individual discussions instead of sort of like one person against the world scenario of, for either audience participant or for you guys as well. Here are our draft boards, and definitely building these out will take time. But to start off with, we've got a general big picture question, continue, stop, start, asking sort of when we're talking about the airport as a community, going to this third objective, what are things that we should start doing more of related to how we discuss it? What are things we should stop doing? And what are things that we should continue doing? And a space for public feedback. So this is sort of, all right, y'all, like, let's same page. How can we keep these discussions moving forward? How can we, go into these conversations knowing that we are, at the end of the day, we're all one community, and we all want to do what we can to do our best. So this is sort of to get at that question. How do we want to have this conversation as a community? Start doing, continue doing. This is sort of just an open comment board for people. If they want to comment, great. If they don't want to comment, they don't have to. There'll be Post-it notes and Sharpies all across the room. Folks can pick up their favorite color and make notes on it as it will. That's sort of our first board. Next, we head into the airport in context. So going through those fast facts, what is it? How is it currently used? What does it mean to fly in and out of the airport? Where is it at? Sort of what we would say is fast facts of the airport. How long is the runway? Sort of what is the Glenwood Springs Municipal Airport? Just sort of base information, so folks who even anyone from someone who is super familiar with the airport and what it is like to someone who has heard that this is a community conversation but doesn't necessarily isn't a pilot, could have a footing of information for them. And then some questions around this are, what have you observed about the airport? What are your insights about its function and role in our community? And input, ideas, reactions, concerns, and hopes for today's operations. So this is sort of the more right now immediate. What do you think? What are your thoughts? What are your starting perspectives? All right, next will be the airspace study. So that diagram that Terry has talked about, sort of, and its big picture impacts for folks, what it means. This is more of an informational board with some of those details of what this airport study is, what it covered, and what are the impacts from it. Next is immediate.
Wait a minute.
Oh, go ahead.
Before you go on that one, I think we might want to have something that one of the questions like Shelley had, and that's that something that would deal with if you're impacted. What is your view of that? And maybe this isn't the right place. I don't know. Just a thought on that. If they're going to be impacted by the air, if they're already impacted, or they will be impacted if we do things. And I don't know if this is the right place for that. Anyway, just thought.
Good thought. Immediate airport safety, what's going on there now? Like, what are things that right now like have to do with how do we have a safe operational airport right now? Things that are top of mind for folks. Sorry, I'm kind of breezing through these so that we can see is the thing that you want to know covered on one of these boards. Southbridge status, so tying back into the Southbridge project, because these two things are definitely overlap a lot. So where is Southbridge at? Talking about this EA reevaluation process, how it sort of big picture, the airport and Southbridge connect, why they overlap, how they overlap. And then the next area is the weighing options. So this gets into we generally have these sort of options that we're looking at as we sort of plan for the future. We've got the keeping the runway where it's at and having a tunnel option. We've got the moving the runway north, tying back into the airspace study, and not having a runway option. And then here's a point of question for y'all is was in the feedback we received a request to include the shorten the runway and having no tunnel for Southbridge, which is definitely something we want to ask. We're definitely planning for those first two. Is this third option something that City Council would like to see included for discussion at this meeting?
And I think I'd like to get public feedback before we give opinions, but if we have questions about what's been presented for staff, then that's great. So Councilor Hershey, do you have a question or do you have a comment?
I have a question. Can we just set a date for this? Because am I mistaken, Mr. Mayor? Am I in some sort of cast of the Groundhog Day? I appreciate Ms. Starbuck spending so much time on this, but don't we have an election set in May? That's the only thing listening I'm going to be doing to what the people want. So I'm not going to talk anymore. I appreciate Ms. Starbuck doing a lot of work on this. It seems like a colossal waste of time to me when we're going to have an election in May. Thank you.
Thank you for those questions. Any other questions? Shelley, was that your hand up?
Yeah, I just had a question on kind of the overall number of boards. Does that look reasonable for a session like this? You know, the number of stations, is it something we can handle well? And then I had a question about kind of the wording of the questions on weighing options. I don't know if, I don't want to, you know, Southbridge is our highest priority for transportation and evacuation and safety. So I don't want to, I guess, give the impression that that's an option. You know, it's something we're pursuing with all of our energies to get this Southbridge built. It's more of how do we do it. So I'm questioning the wording of what would it mean. I'm just wondering more if we can word that, and maybe that is good questioning. I don't know. What would it mean to you as an individual? Is that kind of where that's coming from? Or I'm just wondering, I thought it would be maybe more of a question of, do you have a preference? Or, but I'm not an expert on crafting these things, so I'll just put that question out there. But I will say, I think this is a really important session for us to have as a community, because yes, we are having a vote, but we've got a very limited direct question relating to our charter wording, which will be on the ballot. It doesn't really address any of these issues, these important issues for the community to understand and weigh in on. So I think this is an important session for us to have.
Thanks, Shelley. Charlie. Oh, I'm sorry. You know what, Charlie, I'm going to jump in. Look, Michael's hands up.
Yeah, thanks. I just wanted to offer that if you ask a really wide open question, like what would it mean for the city? So you're really asking people to take the large view, to think about the whole community and the implications, and they will drill down into their individual, I like, I don't like, I want, I don't want. And I don't think you have to prompt them. Instead, what you want to do is prompt them to think big about it, knowing that you're going to get their individual perspective. No matter what question you ask, you're going to get those things. So you don't have to ask directly, what do you want? People will tell you.
They've never been shy so far. Councilwoman.
Thanks. And by the way, Bree, they'll have a chance to review it. Great work. I'm sorry I didn't say it ahead of time. It might have been my total screw up. When Jonathan said agenda, I thought I hadn't seen one, so I apologize if I missed it. The things that I think are missing, and it's in the one on the immediate airport safety and the weighing the options that I think is missing. And it's really easy to weigh options and talk about what are options, good, better, different, without knowing what the costs are. For instance, on the fuel, I think we're voting tomorrow. So I remember we're voting to approve. Can't remember if it's a consent agenda or otherwise, but we're voting to approve purchasing the fuel. And I think we should put it that we just purchased for X number of dollars. Fencing, it'll cost this, and this is why why it's going to be there. The problem is nobody understands what fencing means. Ground maintenance, what does that mean? And what's the cost of that? Communication, Unicom radio. Again, I think it's something we've added, as I remember, and we cost this amount of money. So I don't. That's it. And then you get into the weighing the options, and the problem with the weighing the options that I see. And again, I was using the number 6 million. I know that number isn't correct, but what's the net increase in cost to build the tunnel? And the question I have for the public, and I don't know that, I'm not trying to raise anything that cause political issues, but how do we pay for it? That's always been my question. If we can't raise funds through grants, if we raise funds through grants, it doesn't make any difference. But if we can't raise money through grants, does the public have an idea of how we should pay for that? Or whether we should pay for it? And I think if we miss that, we miss a real critical question. And the public, it's really easy to say, I want an airport. And the question is do they want to spend tax dollars to build a tunnel to keep the airport? And I don't want to, it's really politically charged when wording it that way. There's better ways to word it. I'm sure Michael or Bree, you guys, this is your field, you come up with ways to do it. But if we don't put the cost in, I don't think we're getting answers. And we're not getting honest answers, or no, that's not fair. We're not getting answers that have the information base behind them. So those are my comments on that. Bree, great work here. And I appreciate, I agree with Shelley. I think this is a very important session we have. Part of the problem we have is people, so we're not listening to them. And this is a great place to do that. So I do appreciate all the work.
So Charlie, so what I'm hearing is you would like individually where we can for us to put what would it mean for the city to a runway that is today and have an insulated tunnel for Southbridge? Like right there, you might it costs this much to have an insulated tunnel for Southbridge, like as a second sentence.
You can't get that money from grant. Would you be willing to, in some manner or other, to help pay for that?
And I'm asking because if we want changes, I want to hear from you guys about the changes that you want as a group.
I think
I want those. That's my view. Otherwise, I don't think I get a real good view for the public of their views on the airport.
So I would ask the rest of you, how do you feel about that? And we will make that change if a majority of council tells us to.
I would love to hear any more questions from council at this time. I'd love to hear from the public about what they think. And then I'd love to hear more council comments based on that public feedback. So Paula, you're next. I'm sorry, Charlie, are you done? Okay, good.
Here's a question, really kind of, yes, thank you very much, Bree, for doing this. This is great. And for myself, you see a overview with a vote, but really, I'm really curious on getting feedback from the city. So I'm looking forward to a listening session. But my one question is some of these details, cost, planning, that type of stuff, will those be covered in those kind of video presentations? I mean, do we have, I think it might help to have a brief reiteration, but I hate these boards to be, and this is just, is that information already going to be there? And then do we look at how we present it on the boards, so that people can quickly look at it and cover the boards with sticky notes? But maybe dividing up how that information is presented is another opportunity. That was kind of a question suggestion. Go ahead. Next.
Go ahead, Ingrid. Thanks, Paul.
I don't think that I'm curious if there's any way or opportunity to incorporate something on our boards and charts that says, if you have further comments, please send all, emails to this contact place. Only because, some people won't have they'll just be starting to process their thoughts. And I would love for them to have an opportunity to contact us even after. That's just more of an observation that we don't have that. And then also, I think it allows for some, I would love to see some way to incorporate just some anonymous feedback as well. People who come from different veins within the community who maybe have comments but don't want to smack them up on their board in front of everybody else. I'd like that as well. But that's, once again, those are more like, I could do this. I can either say it as a comment or I could go, have we decided to incorporate something like that? And then I've turned it into a question, and then it's appropriate right now. Right? Yes.
I think that's a good point for us to have a conversation about.
Yeah.
Any other council questions? Okay, seeing none, I'd love to get some feedback on what some people in the public would like to think about this.
I have one more question.
Go ahead, Paul.
Sorry about that. I didn't see anything on here about always having a helicopter pad. Is that further down on this presentation, or did I miss it?
Down, there's more.
Okay, sorry. I just wanted to.
That's a great question. I'll go ahead and pop that in there. That's something that we would, so you can kind of see sort of in the weighing the options. That's sort of what I would say is like an underpinning piece of information for whenever we discuss any of these options, is we'd include that piece there.
Yeah, I want to make sure if that is something that all of council wants us to add, because that is potentially contentious.
That's fine. I just wanted to make sure I hadn't seen it on there, and I know that I had seen it in some comments. So I just wanted to bring that into part of the focus. Thank you.
Thanks, Paul. All right, I'll turn it over to public comment. You got 3 minutes. Please give your name if you live in city limits or not. And yeah, be kind. All right, I have Donna Yost. Donna, I think I've unmuted you. There we go.
Okay. God, I have a ton of questions because this was kind of a surprise. I just learned about this today. And I don't know what the wording is of this thing that's going to be on the ballot in May. I assume it has to do with the people that were going around asking for signatures. But I feel that the airport is used by a very small number of people. And this is city-owned property and should be used for the best uses of the city as a whole. I have questions like the last time, and this is the reason why I wanted to know what was on this May ballot. The last time we voted on the airport, it was extremely misleading. The people who wanted to keep the airport put it out there as we're choosing between development or keeping the airport. And then, people didn't want development. They chose the airport and then started screaming when.
Ms. Yost, I'm
Yes.
so sorry to interrupt. I'd love to keep comments specific to the agenda for the listening session. So if there's things on the agenda.
Sure, I do have a question about the runway. What is it meant by moving it north?
And we don't engage in a back and
Mount Sopris Drive, or?
I think that's part of the conversation. Yes. So I'm sorry, we don't usually get into a back and forth. So I'll just let you do your comments on the agenda. And if you see things or want to see things, that'd be helpful to focus this.
As I said, I had the things that I just saw on the agenda. I have a lot of questions. So maybe this is not the time for me to be asking them. I should wait until I see the, one of the things was like information board that Brittany was talking about.
Yeah, I think, Jonathan, I don't know, Don, I don't know if you understand, but we're trying to set up this public session, and all the stuff you just talked about, be things you will come to the public session and give input on. We really want to hear it.
Okay, well, I'm confused on what you would like to hear from me right now.
Oh, I'm sorry. So Ms. Yost, this is a meeting about setting the agenda and the scope of that meeting. And so if you see things that aren't in there, you've talked about things that maybe if they're not going to be represented in that agenda, then now is the time. But we're going to have a meeting. Let me just be clear. And I'm sorry if I wasn't clear.
Okay.
We're going to be having a meeting. I'm hopeful in the next 2 to 4 weeks where we invite the community, and the community can ask questions about these things and can give feedback. And what this meeting about tonight for Ms. Yost and everybody else out there is, are we asking the right questions? Are we presenting? We've heard from Councilor Willman that maybe he wants to see a board that talks about costs and how the community pays for it and prioritizes it. So if that's something that you agree with, that this would be the time to say, I don't see a board that's asking this, or it seems like these boards are saying this. That's the intent. So I apologize if that wasn't clear.
Jonathan, if I may add, I think I'm sorry, go ahead, Shelley, you had my apologies.
Well, I was just going to suggest also, just to clarify for our attendees tonight, that tonight is not the time to give comments about how you feel about the airport or Southbridge or the tunnel, no tunnel. Tonight is just, how do we set up this good open house and community listening session where you can do that. So I would also like to hear if people have ideas on what's the best location to do this, what's the best time of the day or evening, day of the week, as well as, best format so that we can really hear from people.
And I think the thing I was going to add, Mr. Mayor, is that what we're looking for the public right now, at least what I perceive, what you're asking the public to do is, are there topics they'd like to talk about this meeting that aren't covered on the outline that's before us?
Yes, I did a very poor job of, I think, advertising that. So, Ms. Yost, because I think I did a poor job. Do you have? I'll give you your 3 minutes are up, but I'd love if you had one comment about the agenda or the meeting that meant something. I'd love to get one last final comment from you.
I would hope that you get as much input as possible, especially from the people who live around this airport. I live in Glenwood Park. We're most affected by it, but and I definitely want to hear from the other side as well. Now, obviously, I'm not for keeping the airport, not when it costs more for a tunnel. And but I'd like to hear how people who want the airport, how they think it's going to be a benefit to this community, and why it should stay.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Ms. Yost. We will make sure that when we have a date and a time that the community knows, especially the neighbors. Mark Kurtz.
Hi there. Thanks a lot for taking questions. I just had one, and I believe when under the weighing the options section of the agenda, I didn't see one of the options as being eliminating the runway, which I think is an important item to add.
Okay. Is there?
Well, I didn't know if there was a response. I'm sorry. And,
No, we don't go back and forth. Just
okay.
keep it all out there.
So yeah, I'd like to see part of the board regarding that topic, eliminating the runway, possibly keeping the helicopter operations, but eliminating the runway altogether. And then I just had a comment regarding Councilperson Hershey's statement. We actually did have an election last November, and the community voted pretty overwhelmingly on it. And I'm just personally, as a citizen, offended that he would disregard that election completely and not participate in this meeting.
I'm participating, Mark. There was a vote and there's going to be another vote.
Councilor Hershey, Councilor Hershey, out of order. Go ahead.
Okay.
Notice if you mute me again, I'm going to.
Go ahead. This is public comment.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And finally, in terms of participation, I don't know if there's any way that this could be a virtual event or something that happens partially online. I guess that might be hard to moderate, but maybe would lend itself to more participation. Anyway, thank you for your time and your service. I'm finished.
Thank you very much. Other public comment? Okay. Seeing none, I will turn it back for council comments. Councilor Willman.
I'm sorry, I was waiting, but what I would like, if we could, I saw Dave Merritt is there. He's our chairman of our airport commission. I don't know if he has any comments where he thinks we're getting the right issues or not, but if Dave has a moment, if he doesn't mind just weighing in and say likes, dislike, or feels that we're good or not good, I do appreciate his comments as the chairman of the airport board.
Dave?
Okay, I'm live.
You are.
Not Memorex. Okay, yeah, I guess, yeah, I appreciate the council's going to this extent. I think we do need to get good public discussion. We also need to have a presentation on what does it mean to change the EIS if we're doing this. So that will be a discussion also. On the insulating the tunnel itself, I guess I'd like to see is where else have we had essentially bridges like that have been insulated. I know Glenwood does not have any, and I don't think we intend to insulate Southbridge. So I think it'd be important if we're going to add that as a cost item. We need to show why it is and why it's necessary for future bridges. And it might be desirable to have a board there for the Friends of the Airport, essentially the pilots and the airport users, expressing their opinion. So I guess those are the things. In terms of timing, boy, it's always going to be difficult. We need to make sure that we avoid any school closures, spring break, things like that. That doesn't come until mid-March. I think also probably a weekday night is going to be best. It's always, there's conflicts, everything else, but I think a Saturday would be even more conflicted, especially if it's a good snow up or sunlight. And so I guess those are my thoughts in terms of location. If we can have it at Cypress Elementary, if we can work with that, I think that would be good to be able to have it in the neighborhood. We've had meetings there in the past at Cypress Elementary, so if we can do that, that would be good.
All right, thanks, Dave. Appreciate it.
Yep.
All right, I'll bring it back now for council comments. Go ahead, Shelley.
I was just going to say that I feel like I like the comment if there's some way we could do a hybrid meeting or have an option for people to see the looped presentation virtually. and then see the boards and be able to post comments, as long as, you know, they can do that online some way. Maybe it doesn't have to be the exact same time as the event. I'd much rather have it in person, but with everything going on nowadays, that might not work for everyone. And to me, the more input from the community, the better. So, but I do think people, if they're going to comment, they should, you know, it should be, they should register, sign in, and give name and address and everything else. So.
And I said, Bree, correct me if I'm wrong. I mean, I think we were gonna tape the videos ahead of time and put them on our website going, so people have access to them in the future. And I'm assuming
great,
could have people somehow register to make comments, but I don't even know what I'm saying, so.
Yes, I believe the plan would be to post the video, or the plan is to post the video on a page for folks who can't make it, to just have that information too, because it'll be a nice little piece of information, so that'll be on there. And as far as virtual comment, that's something that staff can do if that is something that council would like to have an option for people to provide virtual comment. We could set that up as a simple form that anyone could submit. We're happy to do that.
Thanks, Brianna. Charlie.
So I was going to, couple of things, and I think Shelley covered them both, but Bree, my view is yeah, we should, you know, if we can, as we post that, and I know it's easy to say, it's probably harder to accomplish in practice, but if we could have the equivalent of a board that people could basically write up to 50 words or something as a comment, the same they went, they're going to put a sticky on the board, they could do that virtually. I don't think allowing virtual participation was going to be practical, but allowing them to post those comments that they could be added to the board would be a good idea. And then the other thing I think is important is when we had a work session last spring and we talked about the airport, we had a lot of people from out of the community commenting. And I think it's fine they comment, but I think it's also important that, and maybe Shelley, is what you intended by your address, but you know, even if they put, I'm a city resident, not a city resident, I don't know, there was maybe it's an easy way to do it, maybe color stickers or something. I think I saw somebody made a comment like that. Jonathan, maybe you did that, but that, you know, put different color stickers up. If I'm a resident, I use yellow. If I'm a non-resident, I use green or something like that to post the comments. And we've got to trust people that are going to be honest about that. But I certainly, the comments of in-city residents versus out of city will have a lot more impact on me. Although I do want to know people who fly in, as we heard them in the work session last week, I understand their thoughts on it. So, and Mr. Mayor, I know Mr. Hershey's had his hand up. I think I appreciate that he was the time that somebody was talking and he was trying to comment. I think we should allow Mr. Hershey to comment. I hope you're going to do that. So.
Yes, of course. I'll let everybody comment. I didn't. I muted Councilor Hershey when he started arguing with a public comment, and so this is the appropriate time for Mr. Hershey to give his comments. So, Mr. Hershey, go ahead.
Thank you. I just wanted to be clear that I was listening the whole time. I can't stress enough how interested I am in this issue. Mr. Kirch just simply doesn't understand the facts. This council, against, in a 4-3 vote, forced a false ballot question on, and that was soundly defeated because even pro-election people, pro-airport people voted against it. So they have a petition. That petition was very difficult to get on, but they finally did, and we acquiesced and put it on the ballot with some changes. So in May, there is going to be an election. So that's my comments from earlier, where I'm happy to go to a listening session. I'd like to listen all day long. There are many different views on this airport, but the real plan, and Mr. Kurtz should be aware of this, is to destroy that airport, to close it, to get rid of the runway, and that may please some people, and to build condominiums there, and I'm against that. But if that's what the people want, and it's in the spring, they vote that way. That's why I say it's fine to listen, and we can have, Mr. Mayor, listening sessions without people being muted all the time. But I think the purpose of listening would is best held in an election. As Mr. Hirsch said, there was an election earlier last year, excuse me, and there's going to be an election later this year, and maybe we'll have some more direction. But this council seems intent on sometimes going against the will of the people, and then they petition, and then they get things on the ballot and they change. But I understand it's a contentious issue. I'm happy to listen. I just was asking when a date and time and when the best place would be. And I think Dave Merritt had some good ideas, Mr. Mayor, so I would hope you would listen to him. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Hershey. Councilor Stepp.
Sorry, took me a minute there. Just a few of my thoughts. I really like the idea earlier discussed about making sure that we include information with the presentations or on the boards about cost. I do want to say that I think on the boards, we want to be very careful that it's not overwhelming on the information on there. And Brianna, I didn't quite understand if those boards, when they had multiple A, B, C, D options, are those different boards or is that all in one place? So we'll wait to see what that is. But anyways, I'm just concerned about too much information in one place. But yes, definitely on the dollars for the cost of things. And then also an option, I was thinking of this when Dave Merrick said, seeing the Friends of the Airport viewpoints as well is, for me, that kind of lent to, well, I would love to get feedback from the community on a board or something that allowed them to say, what do you see as different funding options? Where do you see us paying for this and how would we pay for it? And give them some ideas. But something like that, I think, would allow some action on people really kind of thinking, how do we pay for this? And it's easy to kind of, be flippant about it. But I'd really like some serious consideration from the community on what that is. And as I mentioned earlier, different things that we've talked about all along, whether it's the helicopter pad, open space, some way to present. These are different things that people have talked about just so that everybody's aware that that's on the table rather than having them presented to us again as new options that night. I just want people to be aware that these things have been under discussion and we heard this and we don't need it presented as a new idea. We need your feedback on how you feel about that. So, and that would be difficult, Brianna. So, but those are kind of the thoughts rattling around in my head as we're talking about this.
And if I could, and I promise I'm not trying to be difficult, any changes to the boards, I want you guys to vote on. So I know I have clear and absolute direction to make a change.
And with those changes to the board, would we see that afterwards, Deborah? I'm just, we're going to give you feedback tonight based on this quick overview that we saw, but we didn't really see the boards. So I'm just trying to get a sense of how we'll do that.
You guys do not go into the detail of seeing the boards ahead of time, but I do like, if you want us to put on, this is how much the tunnel will cost. I just want clear direction from a majority of council telling us to do it. We're really in the weeds here, so let's just stay in the weeds and get it done. But I really don't want to bring you back pictures of the boards. I think
that's understandable, but I'm just saying, are you going to ask us each of these points back and have us vote one by one on all of these things we're presenting? I just trying to get a concept of how we're going to do this.
If you want us to make a change from what Bree presented in the board specifically, or the objectives, yes, I want clear direction from council. Because I don't, 2 months from now after we've done it, I don't want someone to be like, well, we didn't want that. That's not what we wanted. I want to know exactly what the majority of council wants.
So Jonathan, will you be presenting each question to us at the end of this meeting that we vote on? Is that how we'll be doing it?
So far I've taken notes about things that people have said that they might want. So if I miss one, please absolutely bring it to my attention. But yeah, I will, anything that people have said is a suggestion. I will bring that to a vote. Hopefully we just have 4 or 5 votes and that will be the direction the staff needs.
Great, thanks. Just trying to understand the process. Thank you.
Absolutely. Councilor Wusso.
I wanted to clarify. I think that Councilor Hershey brought up some very good observations, and that is that we have had a very tumultuous history with this property. And even if it were to maintain as an airport, we still have a lot of confusion over what the best direction is to go with it. And so the purpose of us meeting this evening was really, like we're doing, to ask the right questions and make sure that we're asking the right questions from the community. So, you know, there is no plan on the airport right now to close it and demo it and put up apartments. That there is nothing slated or behind the scenes, anything happening there. This is the goal of this meeting, is to figure out what the community really wants to see or questions they have. But more than anything, it's for us to hear from the community. And that means that, like Donna Yost, she wants to talk about how she feels is the best use of that space, and others want to, you know, advocate for it to continue. But I think that if we can structure this meeting and ask the right questions, which I think we are on the right track for asking the right questions, I think that, you know, if we do it in all these different formats, both virtually and in person, I would hope that all of the community has an opportunity to feel heard, and give us this data that we can move forward with. So thank you all, counselors, for showing up this evening so that we can really dial in that all of our right questions are being asked. And I really do think that this is a great opportunity for the community. And I hope everyone does show up for it. And I hope we get a lot, like a huge amount of attendance and voices to really make good decisions as we move forward. But I wanted to clarify that we don't have plans for the community or for the airport as of right now. Like, where we're at right now is trying to figure out what the future of it is, but very much via votes and also from the community, not us. Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor. Shall I see your hand up? I'm going to give a few comments before I come back as got a chance. So here's what I've heard so far. I'll just kind of summarize some of the things I've heard is, and I won't take a vote on it yet until I hear Shelley's, but I've heard city versus non and distinguishing between that. I've heard people ask if we should give a virtual option. And if we do, if we want to do the city versus non, how does that play in? I've heard Paula mention several times that, and I would agree with this, that the helicopter pad is not something actually that I personally will take a vote on it. I personally do not need feedback on whether we maintain a helicopter pad or not from the community. I think that this council has over and over again affirmed that unanimously. So unless that's something we really want to reopen, I personally don't need that feedback. I think that, you know, to Mark Kirch's feedback on there's not a board for a non-airport option, I think we do a disservice to the community when we say it's just going to be an airport. I mean, he wasn't wrong. We did have a vote that, you know, however it wants to be characterized, the community said they didn't want to pay for some of those improvements and a tunnel. We heard very clearly last March from dozens and dozens of people that shortening the runway was not viable as pilots. We haven't heard from the local neighborhood about what moving that runway, moving it farther to the north and removing those trees. So I'm very curious on that. But I think if we don't, I know staff does not want to open this can of worms, but I think that this is not a true listening session for the community. If the community, the 80% of people who said that we don't want a property tax to pay for a tunnel and these improvements, I think if we don't give them an opportunity and a board to envision what else this property could be other than an airport with a runway here or an airport with a runway here or a runway here, I don't think that's a true representation. So I agree with Councilor Willman. We should have a board on ideas on how to fund it, whether there's sacrifices we might need to make, if there's additional revenue ideas. I think that deserves a board. I would love to take a vote on that. And then I'd love to take a vote. And Jim Light, I think, sent an email a couple of weeks ago saying that, you know, not having the discussion in this meeting was something we were missing as well. So it's something I've heard a couple of times, and I would support having a board that would envision that. So I see my comments engendered a few more hands, but go ahead, Shelley.
Okay, I was trying to understand and take in all of your comments. I don't know that I caught that last one.
I just was saying that from public comment tonight, and Jim Light had sent an email a couple of weeks ago saying that, we needed to consider what this airport would look like if there wasn't a landing strip. I think not having that board doesn't necessarily do a service to what this listening session is about. It's about an airport property. I did not think it was exclusively about the location of a runway, but maybe I'm mistaken.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know if I'm ready to go there, just because I will agree with Councillor Wusso, and I want to make it very clear based on Councillor Hershey's comments, we do not have a plan. I have seen no plans that we are working on to have a future at this point without an airport, because we've not heard from the community definitively on that direction. I do agree with Councillor Hershey that, the question that was on the ballot last year was just about money. It didn't give a big picture. So what I'm hoping to get from this listening session is a conversation about the big picture and the decision that we as council are trying to make to move Southbridge forward in the most efficient manner and get that done, because it's so crucial for the safety and evacuation of South Glenwood Springs and the whole 4 mile and 3 mile corridor. So I know this listening session is about the airport, but I guess in my mind too, it's also being driven by our need to move Southbridge forward. So, but it's important that we have this conversation as a community. And I think it's really not constructive to give the impression out there that council has some other grand plans that we're going to sell off that land and build condos, because that is absolutely not the case, unless there's some deep, dark council state that I don't know about. So let's stay on a constructive conversation and have an honest and open, I just want to hear from the community about, what do they envision as the future? Do we want to be a community with a small town airport? Great, let's make it happen. But there are costs associated with that. So as far as the cost slide issues, Deborah, I'm just concerned to make sure that for every option that's presented, we have the cost kind of an apples to apples comparison, because whether we're building a tunnel or shortening a runway or moving a runway, or even envisioning something where there's not a runway, those all have costs associated with them. And I think we can at least put a ballpark number in there to have as a comparison. So I think we need to have that consistent for every option. Yes, on the virtual partner event, or and then, yeah, I think I already commented that I'd like to have a way to know who's submitting comments online and at the event, whether it's people registered or not. So thank you.
Thanks, Sean. I think Paula and then Charlotte.
Yeah, I just want clarity. I did not mean let's put out there, vote whether there will be a helipad. I just want people to know that that's always been considered a given, and somehow, and I don't know how you would do that. Maybe it's in the questions of 1, 2, 3, 4. Do you want to shorten the airport with a helipad? Do you want to length? I don't know what it is or how we'd present that. I'm really leaving that in a little Brianna's hand, but I didn't mean to vote on the helipad. I just meant that people knew we were considering that as important to our community. And I don't, so that's a bit of I'm sorry to leave that open-ended, but I did not mean that as a vote.
Thanks. I agree. Charlie.
So with your permission, Mr. Mayor, I would like to make a series of motions, and I'm going to try to break it up so that we get clear vision to Deborah what we want. So the first motion I'm going to make, unless you don't want me to make it, but is it all right if I make a motion? Okay.
Yes,
first motion is a procedural motion, or for lack of a better term. I think we should hold 2 public sessions, one at the community center, one at Silver Elementary School, and mostly that's because of size, just to comment. Those should be at times at which they should be public sessions. Second procedural thing is any comments made by people participating in either, well, second comment is we should allow, if possible, technically possible, a virtual vote on the same things at the same time. So we would post the same night as the meetings, an ability to make a comment virtually on the same things that are on the boards. And in posting on the boards or in the virtual comments, so it's a third procedural thing, the people must state whether they're a resident of the city, that is a voting resident, a voting eligible resident of the city, or a non-voting eligible resident of the city. So we get out of the 81601 because we have people in and out. So that's my first motion.
Okay, you're gonna have to summarize that a little bit more clear, Charlie. That was
3 points, 2 meetings, one at the community center, one at the Osopis Elementary, different nights. 2, a virtual participation or ability at the same nights for people to have the boards and vote on options. And 3, that in voting, people must state whether they are a voter eligible resident or not.
Charlie, I'm willing to consider seconding that if you change that last one. I don't think we're voting on anything at this session. We're just taking comment. So I personally would like people, I think we can keep individual comments. If we summarize them, we can keep them somewhat anonymous, but I would like people to be able to either sign in or if they're submitting comments online, to give their name and address if they will. And is there a way we can keep that private then, Brianna?
Let me just comment, and then Brianna, if you want to comment. That was my intent, Charlie. I don't want to see addresses, whether they're private or otherwise. I don't think we need that. That's why I was trying to figure out a way to do resident, non-resident, and so I think I'm open to suggestions on how that to be worded, Shelley, but that was my intent, is not to vote on it that night, to say, am I eligible to vote or am I not eligible to vote in the city? I thought that was the easiest way to break the 2 categories down.
Okay, but they're just submitting comments. They're not voting.
Yes, they're not voting.
Okay, I'll second that.
So I would support that motion, but I think I worry, Charlie, about 2 meetings. I think that's just a lot of work for staff and our facilitator, if Michael wants to facilitate that. I think 1 meeting, especially if people have the virtual option. And you know what, people they can participate in this process regardless of whether they come or not. That we have emails available. We can ask for citizen feedback via our social media things. So Deborah has her hand up. I'd love to hear about Deborah's feeling on that.
Yeah, I was going to agree with 1 meeting would be better, because please remember we have the comp plan meetings going on and also the affordable ad hoc meetings going on with all the regular meetings going on.
I'll make it 1 meeting at the community center. Shelley will agree.
I was leaning towards 1 meeting at Sopris, but just because that's the area and impact, but I defer to the rest of council and maybe staff on what works best. I don't have that strong of an opinion about it, actually.
Shelley, what about we have 1 meeting at staff pick location? Unless Debbie, you want a location.
I think location's kind of important. I think we heard from Dave Merritt, and 2 people who live in the neighborhood were the only public comment they had. So I think having it at Sopris, if it's available, is actually more important of a location than the rec center. But
I'm okay with whatever location. My biggest concern on Sopris was just the size. I was afraid it wouldn't be big enough if we get a lot of people. Because I understand there was a meeting there a couple of years ago and it was fairly crowded. So that was my only concern. Otherwise, I agree 100% it should be Sopris.
Yeah, they have a gymnasium that we could probably do if it works out for them.
Okay, how about we do this? We try for Sopris if we can get it, and if we can't, we do the community center.
So my motion is so amended if Shelley agrees. She's agreed. Okay. So one meeting, Sopris preferable, otherwise community center if unavailable. And then the other points I made, make it easier for Ryan.
Paula, do you have a question on the, or a comment on the motion? Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm just trying to get clarity on that last part of resident or non-resident. Do you mean that every post-it note, somebody writes resident, non-resident, and then their comment, or are you just saying when they sign up?
I'll let Bree figure out how to do that. I think Bree's capable of figuring out how to characterize it so we know we're getting votes from residents or not. Bree, sorry.
If I may, I think that if this is something that council would like to see represented online, that's super easy. I mean, you just make that a field on the form on the boards for comment. For the in-person, it is a little bit more challenging just because, you know, individuals can grab whatever post-it note and post it. A way to do that would maybe have like yellow post-it notes are for residents, blue post-it notes are for not, that is an option, or like certainly on sign in, it's easy to say like generally who is there is another option. But if you want like specific individual comments, that would be something we'd need to, which would be more difficult to regulate individual comments. But
and I was, just for clarity, I'm talking about more like just on the general sign in. So we know, do we have 30% non-residents, 70% residents, or the other way?
Well, I would like to see that simplified for staff, and I like your ideas, Shelley, of just kind of doing it as they come in, and people will, and it's not going to be 100%, but it's just to give you a gist of what's going on and make it easy for staff, because there's enough going on that night. Checking that.
I want to jump in really quickly and say, yet again, I feel like we're getting in the weeds because we're micromanaging. So what I prefer to do, and tell me if this resonates with the remainder of council, is give staff a request that somehow in organizing this meeting, you guys try to be able to help us ascertain who the people are and where they're coming from. And you guys can creatively come up with a solution that doesn't put a burden on staff and also gets that info for us.
I think we've heard a lot of good comments. I think, sorry, let's jump in. I think Ingrid, that's a great comment. I think Brianna, if they could have just simply different Post-its, that seems to make sense. I think it would be valuable to know if the residents of Glenwood Springs felt very strongly about a certain topic. That would be helpful. And I think online, you said it's easy, and different Post-it notes is also easy. I don't need to have, specific streets or anything like that, but it sounds like it's pretty simple, but maybe it's not. But I think what you're hearing is everybody seems to want to have a desire to know resident versus non, both in person and online. Is that correct? Okay, well, let's take a vote.
Oh, wait. Let me clarify the motion because it's been changed a bunch. The motion is we have one meeting, public listening session, preferably in Sopris, but if not, at the community center. Second, the meeting, there'll be a virtual option. Leave it at this. There'll be virtual option for participation. And third, there'll be some mechanism decided by city staff to try to give us clear feedback of resident versus non-resident input. Does that work, Shelley? She's not a yes.
Yeah. All right, Ryan, let's call the question.
Thank you for that, Charlie. Councilor Russo.
Yes.
Councilor Stepp.
Yes.
Councilor Hershey.
I was muted, sorry. Sure, why not?
Mayor Pro Tem Wellman.
Yes.
Mayor Godis.
Yes.
Councilor Cow.
Yes.
All right, clean sweep, 6-0.
Oh, wait, Steve Davis isn't here, Mr. Mayor. What should we do?
Yeah. Well, we don't have a time. Mr. Mayor, I have another motion, if I may.
Yes.
I'm trying to focus on the things that you outlined, but put it in motion format.
That's awesome. Thank you.
Okay, so I would move that the board that talks about immediate airport safety and operational considerations has for the items fuel, fencing, ground maintenance and communication, either the cost that we've already committed or the estimated cost listed next to those items.
So I thought, Charlie, at least when you brought this up, at least what I heard, and this is good, we're taking votes, but what I heard was you saying that we need to find a way to pay for these items in the tunnel, and the community needs to understand that there's a cost. Is that, does your motion?
I haven't given you all my motions. I'm trying to break it up so that we give clear direction to Deborah.
Okay.
I'll second that.
We moved by Charlie, seconded by Paula, that we have costs associated with the other items, not including the tunnel, on the board. Ryan, let's call the question.
Counselor Hershey,
Yes.
Counselor Kaut,
Yes.
Counselor Wusso,
Yes.
Counselor Stepp,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Willman,
Yes.
Mayor Godis.
Yes.
Oh, you guys are too easy.
Third motion, if I may, Mr. Mayor, to answer your last question, I would move that the board and weighed options include the option of how we, it'll let the staff figure out how to do this, but how we pay for it, whether, if we cannot get, let me start over. It would, that option would include, if we can't get grant funding to pay for it, should we spend funds from city funds for those purposes?
Charlie, do you feel that's too specific, as opposed to what funding options do you see for the city to do to pursue keeping the airport in its current condition? You know, something that, I mean, if we ask them specifically.
I like that suggestion. So rewording would be is that weight options would include input on what, if funds aren't available through grants, what funding options would you suggest that the city use to pay for these things? Does that do it, Paula?
Yeah, I'm just trying to get feedback from the citizens. So I think that's a little bit broader and allows them to kind of offer opportunities.
That's a great comment. I appreciate it. So,
well, and I'll second that, but I one of the concerns I would have is if it's so broad, the citizens will say, well, just ask the county. We've asked the county. The county said no. You know, I think we need to, I mean, if we have to come up with X amount of dollars for any of these things from the city's general fund, you know, I think it's helpful to say, here's the sacrifice. Here's what we wouldn't do. Here's the, I mean, not the streets that don't get paved or the pothole that doesn't get filled or, you know, the reduced hours. I don't want to go that in depth, but I think if we leave it so broad and just say without grants, people say, well, yeah, just ask the county, maybe just ask the state a little harder. I think we need to have a little bit of specificity from staff of how would we come up within a 3-year period of $5 million or 5-year period or whatever that might be.
Yeah, I just don't want to lead them down. I don't want to give any implication that we're trying to direct their or emotionally make a decision. You know, it's like, that's why I think I said earlier that, you know, we could put options on the board for them that they could vote for or against, that kind of give them a lead into that, you know, and maybe it's each individual things, you know, the board would say, would you increase taxes? Would you, right now we're kind of at a loss on finding that funding. So I don't want to get into, if you don't do this, then we're going to do this to you. That's not where I want to go with this. We are looking at a listening session. So maybe people have ideas on, you know, different ways to approach funding for this. And I'm looking at it, maybe they say cut some of the projects, or maybe they say, okay, well, let's shorten the airport if that's the funding option. I don't know, but I'm just trying to give them some ideas without trying to direct them emotionally.
So maybe let me just try to I don't think asking them where they would prioritize it is directing them emotionally. I think that's just asking them. I think if we say, Charlie, you're very clear, if we can't get it from grants, if the money doesn't fall from the sky, I think that's fair. I think we also maybe say, if no outside funding is secure, just make it even more general. No county, no state, no federal, no grants, no private foundation. And maybe list out all of those things. And if it has to come from the city, what are your ideas? I think that's not manipulative. I don't think that that's anything, but that is the case. That is what we have right now today. I just think it's too easy. And the thing we always hear whenever anybody wants something is, we'll just write a grant for it, or we'll just get somebody else to pay for it. But that's just not an option. It might be in the future. And if it is, then great. We'll just take that feedback and toss it out the window. But I think having a list of places it's not coming from and specifying that comes from the city and what are your ideas on that, I think that would be valuable. Councilor Hershey.
I'm just concerned that this is starting, you use the word manipulate. I know the city attorney is not present, but we're starting to border, and I don't know if Mr. Willman disagrees, on electioneering. There is a ballot question, as I've said 3 times now, in May, and I don't want us to try to influence anybody. So I don't think we're quite there, but I would be very cautious, Paula, to use this forum to try to push that election one way or the other.
I think that's what I've tried to make pretty clear to me, is that I don't want to push this election.
I'm agreeing with you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Charlie made a motion to move things along. Charlie made a motion.
I'm trying to think about a different way to phrase it, Jonathan. So I'm writing some notes. I'm trying to get an idea.
Well, what if I make the motion that would say, assuming no outside funding is available from county, state, or federal sources, what are your ideas to fund this tunnel? Just as simple as that.
Maybe we don't even approach funding. Maybe this is something I'll vote against. I mean, it's just kind of like, this is just not the place to be asking them, how are you going to pay for it? We're trying to get a feeling for what they perceive about the airport.
Well, I think
I'll make one comment. No, shut up. My comment is that I still don't know that, and Tony, I appreciate you in the votes, and I agree, and I'm not electioneering. I just don't know that people understand that if we're going to have a tunnel, and when there isn't outside funding and the things that Jonathan described, that we have to find a way to pay for it. And I don't think it's fair to them to say that we're going to build it if we don't have money to do it without cutting other city expenditures. And that's the issue I'm trying to make sure it's not electioneering, to make sure that people, when they vote, they understand that's the remedy.
I think when you give the cost, Charlie, when we do the video presentations or have cost out on the board, people are going to see what it costs, and that's kind of implied in that we have to pay for this somehow. And we've already had a vote saying, would you pay for this? And the citizen said no. So, I mean, we all know the cost. We all know that we're going to have to find the cost, and just put it out there. This is what it's going to cost you if you want to do this.
People just said in the vote they wouldn't pay. They wouldn't tax themselves with the mill levy to pay for it. That's all.
Right. I'll step back.
I'm open to suggestions. I just don't. I think I need to know that if people want me to go out as a council member and cut other projects, other funds, or other services in the city to pay for this, I need to know that, because, well, I need to know that. Leave it at that.
Tony, I don't know if I didn't drop your hand after your last comment, or if you have another comment. No, okay. Councilor Busso.
I wanted to say that I am not supportive of having a dialogue or asking the public how they would fund it in the event. I don't want that. That's not what this is for. This is for asking people prior to an election, not about the election, but how best to use this space. So as it currently is, in order to meet our goal of Southbridge. So I do not want to talk finance right now. Now, Charlie, if you presented a completely different concept and that concept was, would you support like funding airport over something else? That's a different dialogue. I could maybe go down that vein, but I don't want to have the dialogue of asking the community how they would fund this in the event of.
So, Councilor Musso, what would that look like?
Well, it could be where you ask somebody, and like you do when you fill out surveys online, what's the most important funding for public spaces or something, some derivative of that in the community. Are roads more important to you, the airport more important to you, public parks more important to you? You could have someone rate it. That might be a route where we could see that 25 people who filled this out said that the airport is their number one important thing over other costs associated with running the city. That might be something. That's not asking them, if this doesn't go through, how do you want to fund it? Or if we can't find other funding sources, are you comfortable going this route? So I don't want to ask that. I definitely cannot support asking the funding question and asking the community who probably has no clue what kind of grants are available to come up with solutions for funding this.
Charlie.
I was just going to comment. I agree with Ingrid. I really don't want to go down this route. This is an airport listening session. We want to get an idea of which direction to go with the project as it relates in the airport. I think we're going to have a lot of conversations about funding and costs as we build collaboration and partnership on the project, but I don't think we want to go there with this session.
Well, I guess I'm just confused because I thought we were having a conversation, and this was the motion that after the vote failed in November and there was apparently confusion or lack of clarity. At least my intention was, what do people want with this property? And it sounds like at least staff does not want to have a conversation with a 10-foot pole about what could this property be if there's not a runway. I'm not necessarily hearing that from council. I've heard it from public comment a little bit tonight, but if we're not going to talk about that, if we're not going to talk about, if the airport users have said we can't shorten it, we've already heard that. We don't need to hear them say we can't shorten it anymore. If we can't talk about how do we fund it, given that, the citizens rejected a property tax for it, then I guess we're just talking about, we're going to hear a lot of people say a tunnel's great and we don't want to talk about how to fund it. And I don't know what the point of this is. I think that the more we open it up to allow people to comment on the property as a whole, including helipad and including the runway, the more we allow people to comment on, I didn't like the property tax, but if we were to do this, I think that that's fair. If we didn't get what we wanted to with the last election, this next election is not going to give us a whole lot more clarity either. It's, do you want to make sure it stays an airport? Does not necessarily give us an understanding of how we bridge that funding gap. It doesn't necessarily give us clarity on how to treat this airport. So I guess I thought this listening session was we could hear from the community what the community wanted to do with a 63-acre asset. I think it's less valuable if we are only asking the community specifically a slight direction, insulated or not, on a tunnel option that presupposes, that preloads all the question and kind of gives the community a very, very narrow choice. And I don't think that that's the most open and democratic way to, at least I didn't think this was what this listening session was going to be narrowed down to, because we were so scared to have a conversation about people getting upset that we're talking about funding, that we would potentially talk about this property without all the amenities it has right now today. I thought it was going to be a much larger conversation, but it looks like I'm wrong. Paula, Charlie, Ingrid.
Yeah, I think one of the citizen comment tonight actually addressed this, and I forgot to bring it back to us. Is there was not an option on that board of no runway, and I think that needs to be included. I think that gets to the question that you're asking, Jonathan. Is let people comment on no runway. This is a comment, citizen feedback. This isn't just how do we change the runway. This is what do we want on this property, and we need to offer them that opportunity in that fourth selection. And that's a motion that I would like to put out, is that in those three options that we add the no runway option to that discussion point.
I'd second that.
There's a motion on the table.
Oh, that's right. Sorry, Charlie.
Sorry.
Let me do that afterwards.
Charlie, just to
So,
summarize. What is the motion and where is it at right now?
I think I'm going to try to clarify the motion, so I have my hand up. I think the motion I made and I haven't heard the input, and I guess we need to find out if there's still a second to this motion. If not, then I think my motion fails. If there's no outstanding outside funding available from local, county, state, or federal sources, how would you propose that the city pay for the tunnel?
I will second that.
Okay.
Ryan, let's call the question.
Excuse me.
Counselor Stat,
No.
Counselor
Hershey. Hershey. No.
Counselor Kelp,
No.
Mayor Pro Tem Willman,
Yes.
Mayor Godis,
Yes.
and Counselor Wusso.
No.
Motion fails 4-2.
Okay. Paula, you had a motion?
Yes, my motion is to add the option of no runway to our list of options on shorten runway, move the runway to the north, and I can't remember the last one. Leave the runway as it is.
I'll second that.
Sorry, could you repeat that? I didn't quite understand that, Paul.
On the board that mentions the different options to consider, we have, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe it's leave the runway as it is with a tunnel, shorten the runway, or move the runway to the north. We need to add a fourth option of no runway with a helipad. I want to clarify. I think it should say no runway, but include a helipad. And would you amend your second?
I would, yes.
Okay.
Any comments on the motion? Okay. Shelley, go ahead.
Shelley does.
You did. I apologize. I just had a quick question or comment. Would we want to are you just saying no runway or remove the runway, or would it just be no runway and hold? I would almost want to quantify that and say hold community input sessions on future of the property or something like that. So it's not, I don't know if you just leave it as.
I like that because I think if people vote for no runway, that doesn't necessarily mean to some people's assertion that we're going to be building condos there.
Right. We have no plan there. So, I mean, if we're going to take the runway out, I guess the question would be that what are we doing?
Is it a vote though, Shelley? I'm just putting those four. I thought those four options were up there for people to just put their thoughts on.
Yes, and it totally is. So maybe that is enough. It's just an open-ended.
It's just offering that here's the fourth thing to be thinking about, not, hey, vote on this or not vote on this. And
okay.
Go ahead,
But
Charlie.
I do agree that anything along that line would always, again, engage the community. As you and Ingrid pointed out earlier, this is not shutting down the airport. This is just trying to get community feedback. And I'm not even saying that I'm one pushing for no runway. I just want to make sure that option's clear there.
Brianna, you have your hand up.
Thank you. Related to this conversation, but also separate. There is a sort of final board that I just want to remind folks that we are wanting to include, because there are naturally going to be lots of thoughts, comments. So there is the last board is sort of input, idea, reactions, concerns, and hopes for the future of the airport / Southbridge area. And that's sort of the idea behind that board, was just sort of like, and anything else you want to tell us about, anything else that we didn't ask about, just as an FYI, for in the vein of wanting to capture any comments that people may have.
And Charlie, I'll just maybe make a amendment, or request an amendment to your motion. I actually like Shelley's comment of maybe just keep it simple, of a no runway option with a robust public process to follow, or something like that. I don't know how I'm capturing that, but I do like the idea of giving people the idea that this is not a definitive finite. If they put their sticky on that, then condos go up. I don't know how quite to do that. So that's I guess my suggestion, but you have your hand up. So I'd love to hear from you since it's your motion.
It's actually my motion.
Oh, I'm sorry.
But go ahead, Charlie.
I would love to hear from you, Paula, about your motion, but Charlie had his hand up. He was making motions all night. I'm sorry.
That was fair. Go ahead, Paula.
I'm okay with including with a follow-up public process. I still think that we're not asking them to vote on it. We are asking them for their comments. And I really think, and I don't know how you do this, Brianna, but I really think we need to be clear that that's what we're asking of people. This is not voting. We just want feedback. And I don't know how we do that, because there was even confusion tonight. So Charlie.
Yeah, I was going to suggest that if you could have that option of no, would you, one of the options be no runway, and if so, what would you propose to be used, this property be used for? Rather than say this is going to be public input, but go ahead and get feedback. If we're trying to get feedback, if they don't want a runway, what are they suggesting to be used for?
Could we maybe utilize the power of other, where where we list all these different options and then we put other alternatives, and then let the audience and the community fill that in accordingly. And they may say, spaceship landing location. I mean, I don't know what they'll put, but ultimately we don't need to micromanage quite so much. This is a listening session. This is an opportunity for us to not pigeonhole everyone, but rather a forum for them to be heard. So let's keep it open. Let's put others, let's use this other alternatives, virtually boxes they can put notes in, follow-up emails, and get the feedback. A lot of the people who are engaged in this dialogue have been engaged for decades. So these aren't new concepts to them, and they likely have solutions already in mind. So
Ingrid, are you suggesting changing the motion from no runway to other opportunities?
Yes. Yep, I am.
I'd be open to that if Jonathan would second it.
No, I'm not. I think that given the community the options of a runway, a tunnel, the option of a moved runway, but not giving them a no runway option is, I would say just take out all the options then. I think it's an important one. We've heard public comment tonight asking for that. I think it's, they can, under the no tunnel build option, I think that's when they can put the others of what they might like to see. I think if we have a substantial number of people and I don't know what substantial is, 20%, 80%, I don't care what it is, but if we have a substantial number of people that say, gosh, we don't want this tunnel, I think that's probably going to be another meeting in the future going, oh gosh, if that's the case, then we really need to dig down into that. So I don't want to dig really into that. But I think not giving people the option of not a tunnel and spelling that out as a potential, when we spell out a relocated runway and a buried runway and an insulated runway, I think that's the elephant in the room with all parties.
Would you be open to the option of a no runway / other option?
Yeah, sure.
Then I'd amend my motion to add a fourth no runway other option opportunities as part of that list of 4 things to consider.
Is that still with the community?
With the community input.
Okay.
I'll second, or I'll amend all of mine to include all of that. Ryan, let's call the question. Sorry, Ingrid, I'm sorry. Did I not lower your hand, or did you have another comment?
I didn't lower my hand. You're fine. Everything's good.
Okay.
Let's continue to vote.
Counselor Hershey,
No.
Counselor Cow,
Yes.
Counselor Russo,
Yes.
Counselor Stepp,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Wellman,
Yes.
Mayor Godus,
Yes.
5-1, it passes.
Okay. Other motions.
Move to adjourn. Is there a second? No. I have to go walk the dog, so good luck, guys.
Tony, Counselor Hershey, before you go, can you just tell us some dates that don't work? I think that's really what we're wrapping up now, is we need to know what dates work and what don't.
I'm fine. I'll make it work. Thank you, guys.
Okay.
Sorry, I had to plug my computer in. Any other further motions that I might have missed, or Counselor Willman might have missed?
I just would ask Deborah if she needs clarification on anything else.
And I would ask Bree. Bree, do you need clarification on anything else?
All right, going back through my notes.
Or Michael, if Michael's going to be facilitating this along with Brianna, I'd love to hear from him as well.
So definitely, like, let's look at dates and times, but there was conversation that we wanted to just talk about establishing the role of y'all at the listening session, and listening session versus inter-conversational debate are different things. And so I would like to knock it over to Mike to sort of just say, what are you guys looking for, and sort of what the different outcomes of the approach might look like.
Yeah, so I think to be true to the original intent, I glibly in our preparation meeting said there are going to be 27 ways for them to not talk, but instead to listen. If you all are feeling drawn into a conversation and want to know what to do in order to really make it a listening session, and I glibly said there are going to be 27 things you could do, and I don't know where that number came from, but then I wrote 27 of them. So I think the spirit of this was that you are in response to someone who's trying to engage you to know what you think. You are going to turn that into, I'm not here to talk about what I think, I want to know what you think. So it is truly a listening session. And that doesn't mean that you turn yourself into mummies and you don't communicate with your constituents, but that you do a lot more listening and very little talking. And so I think my image of it, and you should weigh in on it if you have different views, or you want, or Deborah, if you want a formal clarification of the role, that you are saying hello to your constituents, you are thanking them for coming, you are directing them to information is over here and that question's over there. And then when they say, what do you think? You say, I haven't formulated what I think because I'm here to listen to you. That's the point of tonight. I get to weigh in later. And that your role is to further the idea that this is listening and little else.
Councilor Willman?
Yeah, Michael, generally, I looked through your 27 points and it's amazing you can make that match. But my biggest concern there is, and I think it ought to be a listening session, but I've made my views on certain things known. If somebody says, didn't you say A or B? I think I need to confirm or deny that. Otherwise, I think my response is going to be, I have views, but right now what I'm doing is I'm listening to yours. I don't want to say I don't have a view because that would be that would be incorrect. I would be not being honest with the people asking me questions. I can't do that. I definitely have views, but and what I would say is I have views about this, but the purpose of tonight is for you to give me your views. So if that's what your intent is, I'm 100% behind that.
That's a huge thumbs up. Honesty first, and yes to the way you would answer that. I think that's exactly right. Of course, I've taken a position on some of these things. I'm on record on a bunch of stuff. You know what I think about certain things, but that's not the point tonight.
And to add on to what Mike said, I would say also in helping to connect between this is a great one-on-one conversation and like, let's get this down on paper. So like helping to transition like ideas, thoughts, questions, concerns that you're engaging with people one-on-one and helping to record those. So because, you know, all of you will be pulled into different conversations and some of them will be small groups and someone might really like want to grab your ear about something. Both will happen. So helping to transition those into a written format just so that we're able to share that with everyone else and so that we're fully recording what folks are sharing. And the way to do that is say like, oh, you know what, I think you're bringing up a lot of good stuff. Like, let's go grab a notepad and let me start helping you write these things down. Then we can make sure all of you are able
to promote this, Bree. I'm sorry, Bree, I thought you finished. As you promote this, Bree, both that night and before, I think you make it real clear that council's not going to be making comments on their individual views. They're really interested in getting this community's view so that when people come in, they have that expectation too. The more you can do that, the more it's going to help us on the floor. So that's just my thought. But thank you and I don't know, we need to make a formal vote. I don't think we can tell anybody to speak or not speak and how they're going to speak at one of these sessions. But I think we should all commit as a council that we're going to listen and not pontificate, for lack of a better term.
And I think one of the ways is we heard a comment from someone who said, I just heard about this meeting today and they thought this was the meeting. We're going to get a lot of people probably from the neighborhood, especially the Sobers one, where they haven't been engaged in this conversation for 20 years. I mean, it is a new conversation. A shortened one way is a brand new, relatively brand new conversation for a lot of people. The idea of relocating a runway closer to the neighborhood. So I guess I would suggest that if we get kind of specific questions, you know, we will hopefully have Jacobs there to answer some of those questions. We can, you know, maybe have a signal for Michael to come over and bail this out, because people will want to engage us. And I think it's going to be, I'm agreeing with you, Charlie. I think we need to practice some jujitsu in trying to redirect people who actively want to engage us. They don't want us to listen. They want to engage us. And it's going to be tough for us not to engage. So, Michael, I'm going to be like giving you the get over here and help me through this quite a bit, probably.
Okay.
Deborah.
It's going to say, if Jacobs can come, I think we will rely heavily on Michael and Jacobs, to be honest.
Okay, time. I think that, I mean, not the sooner the better necessarily. I mean, we still are dealing with high numbers, but I think I, have seen enough with the numbers that I would feel comfortable anytime in February having this conversation. I think it'd be productive to have it early, mid-February. I think the closer we get to that May election, the more politically charged it will be. So that's a little bit of my, not urgency, but just, suggestion anyway.
And Mr. Mayor, I know that Paul's gone, if I remember correctly, the dates, Paul, I looked at those today, 6th to the 11th. If I remember that correctly?
That's correct.
Ingrid, I know you're gone that third week, but I don't remember the exact dates.
I'm gone the 9th through the 22nd.
The 9th?
Uh-huh, through the 22nd. So, if we could potentially look at,
I'm sorry, mine's the 4th through the 11th.
All right, sorry, Paula.
so if we could do it sooner and do it either the 1st, 2nd, 3rd of, well, let's see, no, it would have to be the 1st or 2nd, and then, or that last week of February.
I think Deborah, I probably will jump in and say what you're going to say. I hope. I think last week in February, given where COVID numbers are, is a better date.
Right.
I agree.
Okay.
And I just want to make sure because we still have to do work to produce these boards, that is reasonable for Bree to be able to do, for Mike to be able to do, because he does have a life outside of us.
So can we throw out the date of the 23rd of February and see if it sticks, if it works for Mike, Deborah, if you feel like that's enough time for staff?
I just realized I have a conference in Junction, but I can get back. It just would make, I can't start till a little later that evening.
What does the 24th look like?
I'm kind of stuck there. I can't do a 5 o'clock meeting, I guess is what I'm saying, but I can work around it. I'll figure it out.
Paula, could you do the 24th?
Like I said, I'll work around it. I'll figure it out if it's in the evening.
And if I may, I'm out of town on the 23rd. If that impacts your decision at all.
Are you here the 24th?
Or Tuesday, not options? Are they options Monday or Tuesday that week?
I'm not back yet.
Oh, I thought, right, you're the 22nd. I'm sorry.
So I think.
How's the 24th look like for everybody?
I can do the 24th at night. I have a commitment during the day until about 5 o'clock.
I think that's what we're talking about probably. That might be my preferences in the evening.
The last option is February 28th, that following Monday.
I can't do it the 28th.
All right.
Could we, so if the 24th works in general for everybody, let's pencil that in. What about timing? I would suggest that we do it after 6 o'clock to allow people to get home. I would even maybe suggest 7 so like people can have dinner, or do you think maybe we provide food?
Let's start at 6.
I think given that it's an open house and people can come and go, I think you can widen the window and start earlier, even if some of you aren't there.
Mm-hmm.
Because people will come and go on their own terms, and to accommodate them, wider is better.
What about 5:30 to 7:30 for a window?
So what if I made a motion to do this on February 24th from 5:30 to 7:30?
Second.
You want to call the question?
All in favor?
I probably won't be there. 5:30 is early. You're going to 7:30. I mean, just to get back from Junction, leaving at 5 means I get there at 7 roughly. So I'd like to be there, but I'm just being honest. That's earlier.
How about 6 to
8?
How about
6
to 8?
6 to 8 would be much better. Yeah.
So I will amend my motion.
I think we should start earlier just for, it can be longer. I mean, you know.
But so what about 5:30 to 8:30? Is that too long?
Yeah. Do what you can. I'll see where I can fit it in.
Well, Paul, if we go to 8:30, you get back at 7-ish, 6:30 to 7.
And we can take shifts. Like, we don't all have to be there for 3 hours. I mean, similar to what we did with the South Canyon listening session, some of us were able to make it and some of us weren't, and some of us came early and some came later.
I totally get it. And I've already put it out there that I couldn't be there that one week. I'll try to see what I can do for that evening. 5:30 to 7:30 or 8 would be great. Sorry, it's more time.
I would love to have Paula there for at least half, if not more than half. And she says she can't be there until 7. I would suggest 8:30, 5:30 to 8:30.
Great. So I'll amend my motion, and obviously you just amended the second to 5:30 to 8:30.
Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. That was the longest half-hour meeting that I've ever had. I really.
I noted that we would have trouble doing it in a half hour, if you guys may remember, so.
I'm so optimistic. I am so darn optimistic. All right. Well, thank you, everybody. It was tough at times, but I'm glad we worked through it all. Staff, I hope you haven't pulled out too much of your hair during this conversation. And we will see all of you tomorrow night in like 20 hours for a work session. And we'll see the rest of the public that is interested on this on February 24th at 5:30 until 8:30 p.m.
Great.
All right.
I
Motion
moved to
adjourned.
adjourn.
Thanks.
Second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Have a good evening, everybody.
Thank you all for being here.